Hi, it's DC the Blacksmith, Black with my In RE vlog recap and review on the saga that is the Supreme Court confirmation hearing of Judge Katanji Brown Jackson. Okay, this is going to be kind of a speed run. So, we had this week the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to advance Katanji Brown Jackson out of committee into the Senate floor for an entire vote. Um, and we'll talk about that, but it gridlocked. And so it had to go to the floor anyway for the Senate floor to the entire Senate floor to vote for it to come out of committee. Three Republicans crossed over and voted for her nomination to come out of committee to the whole floor. So when they finished committee, there was 3 days of the, well, one day. There was Tuesday of debate and Wednesday of debate. And I think there's going to be debate today, which is why I'm going to speed through this so that I can get this recap and review pushed out. And then her actual vote, the vote that matters the most, is expected to come out today. And so I want to get everything done in a timely order. Okay, so I'll put timestamps, dates, and things like that in the description so that we can all quickly find what we need to find. Okay, so what happens? So I'll start with when the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to advance Katanji Brown Jackson to consideration before the entire Senate. So the Judiciary Committee holds the, I say hosts the hearing, but they're not the end vote to the Supreme Court nominee. They're the committee that does the public hearing, public questions. Um, I don't know. I think they're the only ones that receive the record. Like they're tasked with the bulk of the, I would say, paperwork, in for lack of better words, the procedural things, the record keeping. They're tasked with the brunt of the Supreme Court nomination. So then the Supreme Court nominee goes to the judiciary. The judiciary does their hearing, they hear the witnesses, they talk, yada, yada. Then they have to vote, just like they would on a piece of legislation, to bring it out of committee before the full Senate for consideration. So we're back in the judiciary. And um, we start off with Dick Durbin. He's the chair. He says he's done this for, um, you know, several nominees. The standard course of action for the day is going to be 10 minutes for each alternating senator who wants to speak. Not all, I don't think all senators spoke. Maybe they did. But yeah, they did because I have a lot of notes. This was a long day. So he does the alternating 10 minutes for each senator that wants to speak, alternating between Republican and Democrat. That's how it, I think that's fairly standard. Um, Dick Durbin says that Ketanji Brown Jackson, this is the fourth time she has been before this committee. It'll be the first advancement of an African American woman to the court. He talked about her parents and her upbringing, and she had a uniquely American story of where you can come in one generation because her parents went to segregated schools and she didn't. And so if you know anything about the era of people who attended segregated school and who lived in segregated America, that America, take away take away civil rights, just looking around the country, looking at how things look. That America looked completely different between the America of their children. So, in a way, even let's see, um, my parents, their America looked completely different than the America that I live in. One generation. Um, in terms of rights, in terms of technology, in terms of a lot of things. So, you know, that's um that's just something interesting to keep in mind. Puts things into perspective sometimes. Let's see. He said he was ashamed. of some of his colleagues attacking her because of her work as a public defender. She's not soft on crime. This is still Dick Durbin talking. She's not soft on crime. She'll be a good representation. He likes her methodology. Remember, she says she doesn't have a judicial philosophy. She uses her methodology. He says that most of his Republican colleagues were well behaved. He said that some of his colleagues went as forward as to suggest that she was a liar and that her, as a mother of two, somehow was putting children in harm. That's a point that I might come back to, but that was a little sickening. And then he says, well, she's a better person than him because she handled it well. He kept his comments brief. We go on to Chuck Grassley. He's the ranking member, Republican. I might not always include all their states this time because I was trying to get through it. But hopefully, we've been with these 22 judiciary members. So, pop quiz, maybe you guys can fill in the state. So Chuck Grassley speaks next. He says that he will not support her. He was happy to meet her. She's a nice family. He's complaining about the non-public sentencing commission record that's being held back by the Obama White House. And what I'm thinking this meant, just to decode this, when she was on the sentencing commission, it was under the Obama administration. So I'm thinking that sentencing commission, at the time when she was on it and it was under the Obama administration, they made those non-public, is what I'm thinking. Someone fact check me, but that's what I think. And if they're non-public, they're non-public. And I think he needs to get over it. A lot of times when you have commissions and committees like that who are considering the sentencing guidelines, you want them to have an open, honest back and forth. So you don't want them to have to worry about, if I say this, my donors back home are going to hear this and they're not going to support me. If I say this, even though this is actual and factual, my team, whichever team it is, right or left, they're not really going to like it, and that's going to hurt me. The sad fact of the matter is that happens. So in trying to facilitate the best public policy, you might not want that out to keep everybody in the room open and honest. You might say, well, this could be non-public. But, to that I'll say, if it's non-public, it's not public. There's a lot of things that are non-public. Keep it, let it go. It's non-public. And from what I gather, they got enough of the commission's stuff. They got stuff. It's not like they didn't get anything. They just didn't get what they wanted. Children do that. Anyways, so then Katanji, he says that she told them of some parts of her record that she couldn't get because she's not on that court anymore. Y'all, that happens. She can get some things that are probably public and some things that I would say semi-public in regard that they might not be available for FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, but they might be available by request of some other official business. These are actual court cases. In the past, I don't know always, but I know the last recent Supreme Court nominees, they've dealt with people who come from academia and people who come from, if they had court experience, it was higher courts. So those appellate courts, district courts, not the courts that we think about, not what you see on Law and Order, not the courts at the lower tier that have a heavy factual record. These records come in with the actual details of what happened in the case. a lot of times when you go up courts, you don't need as much of that factual record because you're being appealed on particular parts of the case. So you only, maybe, if it's not procedural or anything like that, you only kind of need the factual record that pertain to what you're being appealed on. You don't need the entire court case. So no, she can't just go down to any court that she was on, the lower she goes, and just get everything. No, that's not how that works. She can't get it. Y'all probably can't get it either. That you have enough of, I have no doubt in my mind that you have a substantial portion of her record and more. Let's not act like you don't have anything. That's not the case. So then, continuing with Grassley, he says that the Democrats are the ones who started with Bork and the judicial philosophy. Says now the Republicans are using the same tactics again. To me, that means you were without morals. If your justification for your behavior is, well, they did it, that means that you don't have morals. That means that you don't have any type of solid fabric or root system to define who you are. Because, and it might so far to mean that your faith may not be where it needs to be. Because if you are any type of Christian, you know that when you get to that day, you have to answer for yourself. What actions did you take? Not, oh, this person did this, so absolutely not. Absolutely not. And, maybe when you get to that level of their career in politics, maybe that's how you have to be. I would hope that I don't have to be that way ever. I am who I am. If I thought it was wrong then, I don't care. I don't care who does it. I don't care if the Mahatma's doing it. If I think it's wrong, it's wrong. And not, oh, well, they did it, so I'm going to do it too. That's just, it's something about that I just find that just makes you so spineless of a person. It's just not okay. So then he says, Senator Cruz asked her questions about fundamental, inalienable human rights, and she didn't expand upon it. He didn't like it. Let me tell you all about what natural rights is and things like that. When we talk about giving rights to people, maybe who don't look like us, maybe who don't have relationships in the way that we have relationships, we're not thinking in terms of, oh, being this is a fundamental national, right. We're more thinking in terms of, as a human being, what rights do we give to a person? Which is why they had to make African Americans persons for us to be able to even be considered in this conversation. But we think about what rights do we give this person? And, just in general, a right to privacy, a right to, you can think of all types of number of things that most people left or right would recognize as, read into the Constitution. And then we've established that. So now we think about other things. If I take away the right for this person to have a relationship in this way, does that substantially diminish their rights that we've given to them by virtue of being a human? So I always use the example of abortion rights and birth control rights. Now, all of a sudden, birth control is coming into the conversation. People want to rescind that. It's ridiculous. We thought about that, or the courts did, in terms of a privacy right as a person. And at this point in history, we've established that women are people. Women are people. And they should have the same rights to do those things that they want to do as men. And one of those rights includes the right to privacy. And so the court said, if we take away this right, we have substantially diminished this human's right to privacy. Without this right, this person does not enjoy the full range of the human right to privacy. So that's one way to think of these rights. It's not so much as creating new rights, it's what does this right nest under? So the right to property is one that's used a lot. The right to property, under it nests a whole bunch of rights, copyright, the right for government not to come do certain stuff with your property. If they do it, they have to pay you a substantial amount, yada, 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 are nested under the right to property, to create things, to all types of stuff. We'll maybe go into that one day, but it's not always the case of, oh, they're just making new rights. That right nests under something. I just bet you most of the time the right nests under something. So he didn't like that. Grassley doesn't think she understands certain things. So double Harvard. She don't understand some things. What that means is she doesn't think like he thinks. And apparently, if you don't think like somebody thinks, you're less than as a human. I don't know when we got to that point. I really hope we can move forward from it, because it's not a good look for either side. He talks about the compassionate release case. Okay, I'm going to explain this case. And I'm not a double Harvard. I'm just law school law license. I don't even know if my school is ranked anywhere. If it is, that's great, but it ain't ranked nowhere because I probably wouldn't even got in. Let me explain what happened in this case she's talking about. She explained it, but I'm going to explain it. This person came before her, and I'm pretty sure that this is the kingpin that they want to talk about. Drug case. Lots of drugs, something. He was before her court. He was guilty. They had already made that determination. That's fine. What happened was he had been tried and convicted and found guilty of something 10 years prior. I want to say it was still a drug charge. Between that 10 years ago and now, he's had nothing in his record. So 10 years have gone by between his run-ins with law enforcement. The prosecution recommended an enhanced increase sentencing based on that 10-year-old charge or charge conviction. He was guilty. That's fine. So she gave him an enhanced increase in the number of years he was sentenced. That was well within the prosecution's right to do, yada, yada, yada. Had the prosecution not did that, she would have been bound by a certain time frame to sentence him. Okay, that time frame. A few things happened between the time he came before her. They had, I want to say first step came into play, and compassionate release. So the compassionate release, it had certain circumstances that a judge was supposed to look at. Health, I don't know. That's not that important pertaining to this case. And then some other things happened to where, had he been sentenced before her, that 10-year-old case, the prosecution would not have even been permitted to bring that up, because he didn't have anything in the record between that 10-year-old and when he was sentenced now. So he comes before her with a compassionate relief case. She can't necessarily just give him compassionate release, because what he's claiming as the basis of his compassionate release is not enumerated. But there's a component in the compassionate release that says change in policy or policy considerations, keeping in mind that there was a change in policy between when he was sentenced and when he's coming before her with this compassionate relief case or petition. The change in policy was that old charge that was used to add addition onto his sentence would not have been allowed. So that change in policy, which is also a consideration she's allowed to, something she's allowed to consider at her discretion, that's what she used. Now, maybe he went on to do more crime. I'm not saying that I want people, kingpins, as he called himself. I'm not saying I want people like that on the street. What I am saying is, the fact of the matter is, people go to jail and people come out of jail. Not everybody gets a life sentence. One of the practical reasons that we don't give everybody a life sentence is because we live a long time now. And American jails, at minimum, are not supposed to be somewhere where you just go to pass. So people live a long time. And if we just give everybody a life sentence when they do something at 20 and 30, even 40, that's a whole 40, 50, or 60 years that we're just going to keep them in jail and feed them and house them and medical treatment. One, that's expensive. As callous as that is to say, it's expensive. And two, there's a lot of people in the world. New people are being born every day. So if you go in at 20 and you're still in at 30, do you know how many other people were born and are now 20 and coming in too? So then our jails get crowded. Then they get crowded, and people who need to be in can't always be in or end up staying at home because we don't have the space for them. So then you'll say, build new jails. Where are we building them at? We're running out of places to build new apartments for the people that have not had, run-ins to the criminal justice system. So how we're simplifying the system just to make her look bad is ridiculous. Do I think that a lot of people get lighter sentences when they don't need to? Yeah, I do. And they look all types of different colors, and they do all types of different, not just drug stuff, not just the child stuff, they do all types of different stuff. So, one, I just like us to keep the same energy for all crime. And two, let's not oversimplify how the system works. Let's not make it an oversimplification. So then he talks about the child sentencing again and again. To that I will say, if the law was written at a time where people were sending things in the mail, there is a big difference between now when you click something, you have thousands of images. Somebody who was lawfully looking at something, in one click, all of a sudden they have thousands of things that they wasn't even trying to get into. And now we're supposed to send them to jail, 10 years plus an image? It's just some. I understand what they're saying, but I also understand practically we're going to have to look at that better instead of just trying to vilify this mother. Mind you, she's a mother, and her children were sitting behind her. So I think it's ridiculous to say that this woman is a mother who's raised 2 children. This woman is a daughter. This woman who has law enforcement in her family. Oh, she don't care about children. We know where that comes from. I moved on from Chuck Grassley, and y'all will notice that I'm not going to be, after this, I'm not going to be extremely long with all of these people, because the Democrats are going to repeat themselves and Republicans are going to repeat themselves. Okay, so we have Senator Leahy. He gives a nod to Durbin, says that the committee was, he ran the committee well. I'll remember that Lindsey Graham ran the Judiciary Committee well when it was Amy Coney Barrett's hearing. I thought he ran it well. He says that Senator Leahy is older, and he says a lot of y'all weren't present at the Bork hearing, but he was. He said what happened with Bork is that Bork substantially changed his position on a lot of things, just dramatically changed his ideology, for lack of a better word. Not just his judicial ideology and philosophy, he changed himself. So when he came before the committee, there was rumblings that the White House, who had just nominated him, they even kind of wanted him to pull his name away. He said even at that time, if all the Republicans had voted for him, he would have passed. He said, but there was a large number of Republicans who didn't even vote for him because he had changed so dramatically. So he says that's the full story behind that. Remember when I said I gave that anti-abortion activist who was older and she told that story? And I said by virtue of her age, I said I kind of believe that she's giving the account as truthful as she can. I understand the way he is a politician, it's a little bit different. But by virtue of his age, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he can't make up a story that good. Y'all, that's not a lie you make up. The story had two, it just was too complex. He didn't make that up. That wasn't a lie. Now, can we say the Democrats have behaved badly at times as well as the Republicans? Sure. But what Senator Leahy didn't make this up. He didn't make it up. Anyways, he's going to support her. And yada, yada. He says, put partisan pettiness aside. And I said, it'll be a cold, bloody day with the way we're going. So then Senator Graham, he speaks, and it's lights, camera, action. You know he mad. He gonna vote no. He said this is the first time ever he voted no, and I'm gonna come back to that. Anyways, he says that you know, he wanted Judge Childs, he wanted his person to pick, and he don't like that they didn't pick a moderate. Well, I'm sure the Democrats didn't like that y'all picked Amy Coney Barrett last time, but you know what? They weren't president. And I say to Lindsey Graham with this, if I remember correctly, Lindsey Graham didn't even make it on the main debate stage when he ran for president. If you want to pick, you want to control the pick, you want to be the person that makes the determining factor on the pick, my man, you're going to have to win presidency. I can't help that you didn't win. You didn't win. Get over it. Get over it. You're not in control of the pick. And the Democrats, they had to face the same thing. It's not your pick. This is how it works. I wanted my person to pick. Grow up. So then he talks about all these other cases. He says he found her questions invasive. Amy Coney Barrett was also invasive, rightfully so. Apparently this is a trend. I think it's ridiculous. But this is what they all do now. Then he talks about her being soft on those child cases. Mind you, she's a mother. He says he didn't mind when Joe Biden said he was going to pick a black female. He said that wasn't a problem to him. He just basically he threw a fit and said he mad that it wasn't his person. Then he says when they control, none of their picks are going to go back through. Yada yada yada. He brought up the past picks. And he said, oh, Republicans, you know, Janice Roger Browns. Okay, well, we can bring up, not we, y'all, I'm not a Democrat, but the Democrats can bring up Merrick Garland. It is what it is. It's a lot to go around. But again, I say to Lindsey, if you want to control who the pick is, my man, you're going to have to become president. Then you can pick. You can pick on your own. You don't, nobody have to be in the room with you. You can just go pick. You can pick Childs. You can pick whoever you want to pick. And what I would say to the Republicans who keep bringing up Janice Roger Browns, the African-American woman who I guess they would have wanted to try to get to the path of the Supreme Court. She's not the only African-American conservative judge. So between Janice Roger Browns, y'all have had Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, and all types of lower federal judges in between. You couldn't find any more African-American conservative females, and now you want to be mad? The Republicans were in power for a while. They picked a whole bunch of judges. You could have picked another of her, or at the, you know, she was the only one. That's the only name y'all can think of, and now you want to be mad? Get out of my face with this. So then after he says what he has to say, he ain't going to vote for her, he gets up and walks off dramatically. Now I'm going to get serious. I used to have a lot of respect for Lindsey Graham. A lot. And a lot of people tell me, though, that's when John McCain was still alive. I don't know. And I'm going to say, I think that the reason Lindsey Graham got up and stormed off the way he did, I think Lindsey Graham is embarrassed. And I think he's going to continue to be embarrassed because he gave a lot of reasons for why he's not going to extend his vote for Judge Katanji Brown Jackson, why he's not going to support her. And he listed a lot of reasons. And whether we agree with his reasons that he listed or not, those are his reasons, and he's allowed to have them. But none of those are going to be remembered. All that's going to be remembered is the first and only time that Lindsey Graham chose to not advance his Supreme Court nominee was when there was an African-American woman. That's all that's going to be remembered about him in this vote. All those reasons, and that I'm sure are valid to him. And we can't tell somebody if your reason is valid to you or not. If that's what he says it's valid to him, that's valid to him. All those reasons that he listed, nobody's going to remember it. And after time, to be honest with you, when he looks in the mirror, he's not going to remember those reasons either. All that's going to be remembered of his legacy in voting for Supreme Court nominees, and how he always says, oh, you know, when I voted for Kagan and Sotomayor because they were qualified and the president gets to make his pick. I wouldn't have picked them, but they were qualified. All of that is not going to be remembered. What's going to be remembered is that the first time Lindsey Graham decided not to vote for a Supreme Court nominee when it was his opportunity was because it was an African-American female. That's all that's going to be remembered. And I think he was embarrassed because I think he knows that. He knows that's all that's going to be remembered of the conversation. And I would like to think that Lindsey Graham's not that way. And so he doesn't want to be remembered that way. And I think he's embarrassed. And I think the more he realizes that he's going to be painted a certain way, the more he goes into a certain corner where he's going to be accepted because he knows that he's going to be looked at a certain way. And we live in a soundbite society. Nobody's going to remember all those decisions that, all that stuff that he put it off. I will say, men's, when y'all get up and walk out the room dramatic like that, you need to wear like your suit needs to be lined or something, or maybe a cape or something, like Mr. Maisel from The Marvelous Miss Maisel, season 4, because it just, you know, when women walk out dramatically, sometimes there might be hair or braids or something like that behind her, or dress flowing, or, you know, she snatch her purse behind her real dramatic and flashy like, or something like that. And men just have the suit on, and y'all gonna have to figure out a way to do dramatic exits a little bit better, men, because I'm a third wave feminist myself, and I believe we can do it, y'all can do it. You know, I think probably gay men might know how to walk off dramatically. Straight men, y'all gonna have to get some tips or something, because that dramatic jump up wasn't given what it was supposed to have gave. Dianne Feinstein speaks. She's in support of the nomination. She's very happy. One thing I will point out about her, typically, so the Republican will speak or whoever. So one person will speak and they'll bash the nomination, and the next person gives a few words in rebuttal. Dianne Feinstein didn't do that. She just read whatever her prepared remarks are. And that's because, oh, Lord, I want to be nice. I don't think she was able to do the rebuttal like that. I think the only thing she could do is read from her prepared remarks. And I'll let y'all determine whether or not that's a problem sometimes. I've told y'all before that I like the variation of ages in the room. I would like to see more younger and not younger people who have to answer to the older people, and so they just do what the older people told them to do. More younger people who stand on their own. And I just thought that, I mean, maybe she felt like she was above it. Maybe she felt like she was above it and she didn't have time to go back and forth with anybody. Her and Lindsey Graham are friends. Well, nobody likes to admit they're friends with somebody, but her and Lindsey Graham have been known to call each other friends all the time. I think Lindsey Graham got in trouble because I think she got in trouble, or people were calling to remove her from her office because she gave Lindsey Graham a hug at the Amy Coney Barrett hearing. Well, people are childish. People are really just ridiculous. Like, those people can debate. That's what argue and verbal debate is for. That don't mean that they have to take that home. When they get done debating about one issue, they might get to talking about, I don't know, what's that stuff Lindsey Graham was drinking? Dr. Pepper, Diet Dr. Pepper. They might have been talking about how they both like Diet Dr. Pepper. But just because they left and right, they're not supposed to have anything in common. They're not supposed to be friends at all. People are ridiculous. Anyways, Dianne Feinstein was happy. Senator Corn speaks. He's talked about enumerated rights, courts' roles, judges' roles. He's not going to support her. And what I got from him speaking is basically Republicans want everybody on the court to be originalists. That's it. And just say that. Just say that. We don't need all these long soliloquies. Just say, we want everybody on the court to come approved by the Federalist Society and be an originalist. We want everybody on the court to think exactly the same. Just say that. Anyways, he ain't going to support, and I am not surprised. Senator Whitehouse. Now, I didn't know this about Senator Whitehouse, but I'm learning that Senator Whitehouse is Senator Whitehouse ain't with it. He said lets anything comes out of his mouth. He don't care who's mad, left, right, or anything in between. He reminds me a lot of Ben Sass, because Ben Sass, his last name is Sass for a reason. Ben Sass, another one that sometimes say stuff that he don't care. So Senator Whitehouse says, he says that all the Republican objections, they come from the same organizations that nominate all the same Republican nominations, basically. And he says that, you know, if you bring in a judicial philosophy, when you come in, it should be considered. He said, but originalism works well when you want to go back to a time before civil rights. He says, originalism works real well if you want to go back to a time where there wasn't even enough industries around who were big enough to regulate, so we didn't have a lot of regulation for industries. He said originalism works well if you want to go back to the old social norms. He said, yeah, it works real well. He says judicial philosophies are not neutral. I said the same thing. To be honest with you, Katanji Brown Jackson's methodology, and a lot of people say, oh, that's just what judges do or whatever. Her methodology, if that's how she approaches all cases, that's as close to neutral as I think you can get. And I had never even considered subbing a methodology for a judicial philosophy. And I don't know if I would even, I'm slightly more of an originalist than I think she would consider herself. I would even, if she talks about the plain meaning, basically a judicial philosophy is not neutral. Everybody has a position. Everybody comes from it at a certain angle. I thought, as an American, I thought that was the point of American society. Maybe I've been erroneous my whole life, but as an American, I thought that's what made us the country on the hill. That's what I thought, but whatever. Then he says that dangers from children comes from a group called Cruz for President or something like that. And he just was going down and connecting the dots. They panned over the camera. Senator Cruz and Senator Lee over there whispering. And Senator Lee was real animated. He don't talk that animated, but I guess that's just what he does for the cameras. He said this was cooked up. Then he said, who funded all the ads? While they talk about she was backed by all these groups, he said it was a lot of ads on TV for Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. He said, who funded all of that? And he wasn't having it. So he support her. He gonna move forward with it. It's that Senator Lee speaks. He talks about something that she don't have the proper understanding of something. This again. Double Harvard, whether you agree with her. Let me tell you how bad the political climate is. I remember going to what was not even supposed to be about politics, just going to hang out with some people, for food and things like that. And it happened to be one of my Republican colleagues and her libertarian friends. I think they were even like trying to get more libertarian support, maybe something like that. And I said something to the effect of, I said, well, I have all types of friends. I have other Republican friends. I have Democrat friends, libertarian friends, liberal friends, what have you. All types of people are my friends. And he said, yeah, I have all types of friends too. And then he said, but I just find the liberal friends, maybe they're not educated. I said, no. I said, some of my liberal friends came out of school with me, all levels of school. He said, but I just find that they don't know. I said, no, I don't find that at all. I said, I don't hang out with people who are misinformed and ill-educated. I hang out with people who have differences of opinions or different philosophies and ideologies with me. Now, that might be because of their background, their upbringing, or whatever it is, whatever their fact assessment, their analysis is. I hang out with all types of people. Just because somebody disagrees with you does not mean they're ill-educated. That doesn't mean they don't understand something necessarily. Now, they might not understand something, but the disagreement is not the basis for just saying, oh, you don't understand. They disagree because they disagree sometimes. We do not all have to be the same. And I don't understand what this is where we want everybody on the Supreme Court is not going to be an originalist. Get it out of your head. Get that out of your head. It's not going to happen. I supported all of the candidates, all of the nominees. I actually liked Amy Coney Barrett. Were there things in her background before she became a judge and before she ultimately became a justice that I said, wouldn't have been me? Sure. She was qualified. Move her on. Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, they were qualified. Move them on. Kagan, Sotomayor, qualified. Move them on. Just because I didn't agree with them on some points doesn't mean that what Lee said lacks proper understanding. And I looked at him sideways when he said that about this woman too. I think he lacks proper understanding of how pre-sentencing report works, since he keeps asking to release them so bad. Now that's lacking proper understanding. Anyways, he ain't gonna support her. Klobuchar talks about it being historical, first time in history. She always asks about antitrust. She even goes into, y'all are painting this woman who is a mother as somehow endangering children. And she lists the other judges, some pro-Trump or Trump nominees who they've done the same with their sentencing. She says this woman is faith-based. She brings up a quote that Judge Roberts, during his nomination, said he does not have a general judicial philosophy. And she's going to support her. She talks about how, they do think it's important that judges understand that words on the page do change people's lives. And if I remember correctly, Brown v. Board of Education was a unanimous Supreme Court decision. Unanimous. That means the liberal justices and the conservative justices all agreed to that decision. Now, if you're an originalist, where did they get that from? Because a lot of times Republicans will bring up, well, we all agree that Brown v. Board of Education, it was decided right as it should be. But the implication is, it was still activist judging or whatever, yada, yada, yada. This, that, and the third. No, they had determined that if every human comes with a certain amount of rights, if we separate these humans and we make them play by these different rules, then they are not within those rights that we have now gone to recognize as those rights that are imparted on all humans. Again, most of the time, these so-called new rights, they're nested under rights that we all just kind of generally accept are part of rights that we just give people. That's usually what happens. Anyways, Klobuchar is going to support her. Cruz talks and all that hollering. I tuned him out. I tuned him out. He say, he known her. And I think I wrote before he even starts talking, if he screams, I'm done. I'm sick of him posting up in front of the camera like somebody throwing dollar bills at him. It's everything he does is for the cameras. Anyways, I'm not going through. Ted Cruz ain't gonna support her. And we know that. He knows it. We knew it. We knew that before she even got in the room. He had his mind made up about that woman when he knew her in law school. Just the fact of the matter. But I've always been friendly with her. Somehow I believe that's a lie. Just because you went to school with somebody does not mean you're friends with them. I went to school with a lot of people. I'm friends with a few of them. I went to school with a lot of people who I couldn't pick them out in the crowd. I probably could pick a bunch of them out in the crowd. Again, I'm only friends with a few of them. Senator Kuhn speaks. He thanks Durbin and Grassley for managing to the extent they could an orderly process. He says Katanji Brown Jackson is not from the far left, and she's not outside the mainstream of her sentencing. She has nothing to do with critical race theory. She is not an activist judge. She is not soft on crime. She is not an enabler of people that want to harm children. And he echoed Senator Whitehouse. He said it's dark money on both sides all the way to go around. He's going to support her. Senator Cotton talks. I was done with him because he started off with an elevated voice. He was louder than everybody in the room, and I believe he was louder than Ted Cruz. Why are you screaming? What are you that loud for? This is an orderly hearing, and what are you screaming for? Again, I know that to an extent we all have personalities, and y'all might be able to tell that I'm from the South by the way that I speak. And I know a lot of people say that Southern people tend to speak loud. We don't speak loud when nobody else is speaking loud. When I'm with a group of people who speak like me and we all are speaking loud, that we're all yelling. There's a difference. When I'm in a room with a group of people who they're not all speaking elevated like me, granted, I don't change how I talk, but I will bring my voice down a little bit. Why is Senator Cotton screaming? Anyway, he says she a fine woman. We know how that go. But he ain't gonna vote for her. We're not surprised. We knew that. Senator Blumenthal speaks. He thanks Durbin and Grassley again. He says that nothing new and nothing true. Basically, he says the Supreme Court, the depoliticization of the Supreme Court starts here or ends here. And he talks about the historic moment, yada, yada, yada. And whether anybody knows it or not, if they even out this process on both sides, it will take down the politicization of the court, because I think, for instance, when Amy Coney Barrett was going through her hearing, she didn't say much about certain topics because that's just become the trend. And so she wouldn't say something, but then the Republicans were so eager, they would almost say it, not for her, but they would say something and then it would put that image onto her. So she was there trying to make herself seem more neutral. And they would talk and put their foot in their mouth and make her seem less neutral. See what I'm saying? So sometimes you do harm for your own. Sometimes you're harming your own position the more political you go. And I remembered that about her hearing. And I remember thinking to myself, this woman is Amy Coney Barrett, who I was thinking of. She is trying her best to appear as neutral as she can. She was really trying. And she would have succeeded, but for the Republicans would come after her and they would make it worse. And I know that's not what they were trying to do because that was their pick, but shut up sometime. And the Democrats, I can't figure out if they made it worse because they've been repeating the same thing, you know. They've just been rebutting and repeating the same thing. I don't know if they've really made it worse or not. Let me not say that. That ain't nice, what I was thinking. So Senator Tillis speaks. He ain't gonna support her. He concerned about some of these cases and the outcome and this and that and the third. Senator Hirono speaks. She's gonna support her. She says they were trying to smear her. She points out the commonality in the sentencing. She said she looked up Janice Roberts Brown. I guess she wasn't here for that. And she said in one of her speeches before the federalism, she said more government results in war in the streets. She said, so that's not neutral. She said maybe when she was talking like that, that's what led to people's opposition to her. Okay, right. So let's not act like whatever. Then she says that Katanji Brown Jackson has more experience practice-wise than two of the current justices. She's real happy she's going to support her. Josh Hawley speaks. I didn't take many notes on him. We know he's not going to support the woman. We know he don't like the woman. We get it. We get it. We get it. And I moved on from him because it's the same. Cory Booker talks. He thanks Dick Durbin and Grassley. He says that this has turned into a Festivus airing of grievances. He says it's a mistake to vilify each other. He says that he said evil one time during a nomination and ended up having to apologize because he wasn't trying to call somebody evil. And he remembered thinking like that was terrible as soon as he said it. And I would say to him is, you're another one. Why'd you say it? I'm glad you learned from your mistakes, but that's the problem. When you let other people's actions get you so hyped that you forget who you are, because that was wrong. And I do agree with him overall. He said that he brings up the governor from his state. And I want to say that this was Chris Christie at the time. After the hurricane, he hugged President Obama when Obama came to, they're going to say Obama went there for relief efforts. I'm going to say that the president wasn't handing out nothing. He was there for photo ops and to show his support. And that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But I don't like when they say, oh, the president is there for relief efforts. No, the president is there to get his photo taken and to say that he supports the relief efforts. There's other organizations who are there doing relief efforts. You know, words matter. Let's use full sentences and paragraphs instead of sound bites, but whatever. Anyways, when Chris Christie hugged Obama, he went down 10 points in his polling like the next day. And he said that's because we vilified and made each other seem so terrible to where, you know, we can't even be friends. Anyways, he goes on to say that if Katanji Brown Jackson is soft on crime, then why did the Fraternal Order of the Police support her? He said he don't think they would have supported somebody who was soft on crime. I don't think so either. But, you know, I'm going to say this. All of a sudden now, the Fraternal Order of Police is the end-all, be-all. A few months ago, we was talking about them like dogs. So either we trust that judgment or we don't, because we know how they handle. I'm going to move on real quick. But now that it's good to get their support, now we happy we got, oh, do they support? They support. Okay, whatever. Keep it moving. Keep it moving. He says her family's law enforcement. He said some of the rhetoric that was used talking about her was just disrespectful. It was disrespectful. And he said that it's a common thing to be more qualified than the people disrespecting you. He said it's common among Black women, but it's not just Black women. It's young people. A lot of times young people walk in a room way more qualified and knowledgeable than the people disrespecting them. And they tell you, oh, you got to suck. I'm not sucking nothing up. How you approach me is how you going to get approached. And that is keeping with who I am. I've been like, that's my moral fiber. Now, that don't mean that I'm going to call you evil and this and that and the third, but how you treat me makes a good determination about what type of reception you're going to get from me back. And I'm not just going to let you abuse me. I don't know anywhere in the Bible where it say, let people mistreat you and don't do nothing. No. I don't know anywhere in the Bible it say, let people abuse you and you got to take the abuse. No. There is a way to politely but firmly remind people that you are not somebody to be disrespected. And you really don't have to get out of character to do that. You can remain within your character and very politely and firmly remind people that you are a person too, and you are not to be raised, and this is not going to go down how they think it's going to go down. You can remind people of that very politely and very firmly. Continuing, Cory Booker, he says, how qualified do you have to be treated with respect and common decency? I told y'all before, some of these people you got to Photoshop common decency on. And then he quotes Dr. Maya Angelou, her poem, Still I Rise. He's going to support her. Woohoo, good for you. Senator Blackburn talks. She is not an attorney. Senator Blackburn speaks, and she says she was impressed with her resume. This is the one that asked about she wasn't able to find what is a woman. Y'all know I call this woman the head Karen in charge. I'm sorry. I just think that, let me address this. What is a woman? First of all, female is the biological term. We know a female is a person that has 2 X chromosomes. The woman sitting before her had 2 children, had popped out 2 children. So I don't know why you felt the need to ask this woman, what is a woman? And Katanji Brown Jackson said, I know I'm a woman, but I'm not a biologist and I can't tell you that. The reason that they can't tell you that is because we know that there are people on this earth who are born as one gender, as one sex, one male or female, or maybe they might be born intersex. That actually happens. That's not something anyone invented. Sometimes people are born and it's a mix of both, or however science says it is. That happens in life. So we do know that there are people who maybe are born male, but they live most comfortably as a woman. And so, because we know that those people in life exist, we've become to separate sometimes in certain situations where being a woman may be gender-based. And if it is gender, then it might be constructive, meaning you can construct an identity as a woman if you so choose. Again, the overarching theme of this whole conversation is the fact of the matter is, whether anyone likes it or not, whether it makes anybody comfortable or not, whether you agree with it or not, whether it fits with your religion teaching or not, there are people in this world who may be born as one assigned gender, sex, whatever you want to say, but they live comfortably and productively as not what they were assigned as birth. That's a fact. It happens. So some of us choose to say, I actually don't care what you live as. You're a productive person. You have certain skill sets in society that do not go away, just like women and men who are born the same, identify as the same. Women have certain ideas that might bring inventions and they shouldn't be restricted because they're the woman. I feel the same way about people who are transsexual and transgender. This person has skills in society. This person might be the next inventor of X, Y, and Z. And they should be, all they need to do is live how they feel most comfortable. That's all they need to do. I just don't, whatever. Anyways, she says that's a construct of the left, this, that, and the third. Again, the overarching theme is the fact of the matter is there are people who are assigned at birth as one way, but they live most comfortably and most productive as another way. That's a fact. It happens. Those people exist. And to be honest with you, that is morally neutral. just because you live a different way than you were assigned at birth, I can't determine if you're a good person or bad person just based on that. I know a lot of people who lived how they were assigned and they bad and good. What? Whatever. I moved on from her. Then she started talking about Dick Durbin dressed down the Republicans for asking questions. And I wrote, no, Karen, he didn't dress down Republicans. He said some. Now, this is how people do. That man, Dick Durbin, repeatedly said some of his colleagues, some, some, S-O-M-E, some. Now, just like she say that somebody didn't know what a woman is, maybe she doesn't know what the word some means. Some means not all. If he wanted to say all of them, he would have said all. He said some. And to be honest with you, he probably wasn't talking about her, because even though I don't agree with the questions that she asked, she wasn't disrespectful. What I mean by that is she spoke in the same manner of tone that Katanji Brown Jackson spoke to her. She let her finish her response for the most part. There was a few times where she said, you know, my time is limited. I kind of need a yes or no. She didn't say it rudely. And to be honest with you, sometimes that does happen. Your time is limited. You need them to speak. So he probably wasn't talking about her. But since she got in it, and he wasn't talking about them asking questions, he was talking about the manner in which they conducted themselves in asking the question. So Dick Durbin responded and said the majority of the questions were fair and respectful. And he said he didn't want to name names. He said, but if the shoe fits, wear it. And then she was talking about, they went back and forth on those pre-sentencing reports. No, the answer is no, Dick Durbin said. Senator Ossoff talks. He thanks Grassley and Durbin. Senator Ossoff eating good since he's been elected. I will say that. They said he has a new baby. You know, I want to see the new baby. I think all babies are cute. So then Senator Ossoff speaks. He says he's a new member. He understands that there's a lot of hurt feelings and grudges on each side. He says, but we're tasked with something that should be the pinnacle of being a senator. And, you know, he says that she has a good reputation among her colleagues in the legal profession, and basically he's going to support. He doesn't use all his time. Senator Kennedy talks, and I was ready to let Senator Kennedy have it, because y'all know I don't think Senator Kennedy is a good representation of people in Louisiana. And I'm not talking about like as a Republican, as a Democrat. To me, he's not a good representation of the accumulation of people, white, black, rich, old, young, gay, straight, religious, not. By him sitting there, stay in your lane, he just really didn't know, like he had never heard that before. And I'm sorry, if he's never heard that before, then he's not in Louisiana living amongst people. Because I said it in my last video and I'm repeat it again. I can go to Louisiana and talk to young, rich, old, black, white, religious, not religious, gay, straight, red, blue, purple, this, whatever. I can go and just start a conversation with somebody. And if I say, yeah, this person needs to stay in your lane, they might ha-ha, he a little, but they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And to be honest with you, they might even repeat to me, yeah, I stay in mine. And this, I'm talking about people, all people. He's not a good representation of just society. He's out of touch. Now, he might can get in touch or something. Don't touch nobody, but he might can get in touch with something. But anyways, I was ready to let him have it. But he said she's smart. She knows the law. He said that she avoids answering questions with any substance. And then he says many of the other ones do this. He brings up Makes the Road. He brings up a Madisonian system of government. Well, we live in America, not a medicine. So that is a theory and an ideology. People are allowed to disagree with you. But he kept his comments real brief, and he said that he would not support her. And I will say this about Senator Kennedy. He looked ashamed to say that. He didn't look happy to say that. And again, I think it's because that it's just going to be, you didn't vote for the African-American woman. And that's not, I don't know if that's the reason why. So it is somewhat unfair to just put that on people. Now, as someone who's lived as an African American female my whole life, we know when we know. We know when. We know. You have to know. To stay safe in this world, you have to know without knowing. I don't need you to say the quiet part out loud. I don't need you to whisper it. You don't even have to say it. We know when we know. Some people you might have to get to know a little bit. But to me, just reading him as a person, Senator Kennedy did not look happy to say that. He didn't. I'm not going to read more into that because I've been very hard on Senator Kennedy, but he just didn't look happy about saying that. And I hope he wasn't influenced by donors or anything like that. So then Senator Durbin, this annoyed the heck out of me. So they weren't able to finish this vote up today. Based on the Senate rules, they have until 5 to really do this. He says, Senator Padilla, Democrat from California, his flight was delayed. And he says, it could have happened to anyone. So they have to wait for him to get back. He mentions vote pairing that used to be common, but they don't use it anymore, something like that. Y'all, this annoyed the heck out of me. The reason Senator Padilla's flight was delayed is because of a medical emergency on the plane, not related to Senator Padilla. While it's true this could have happened to anybody, I just want to point out a few things. And I'm going to move on because I don't want to be overly critical, but I'm going to point out a few things and y'all decide. Senator Padilla lives in California. The hearing takes place in D.C. The hearing that I just gave my little recap on, my little review on, this was scheduled to happen Monday. This was scheduled to happen Monday morning. I think they started at 9 a.m. He was on a flight on Sunday for this historic moment. This was a historic moment. The moment was supposed to happen on Monday. You and your family got on a flight on Sunday. Anything could have happened on that flight. Y'all, I don't even do that, and I'm just a regular person. If I need to be somewhere Monday morning, I'm probably going to be on the flight probably Friday or Saturday. Especially now, we know that there's fuel shortages, staffing issues, people acting a fool on planes. All types of flights are just getting delayed dramatically right now. So why would you, knowing you have to come all the way from California for an event that's supposed to start Monday at 9 a.m., why would you get on a flight on Sunday? Shouldn't have left. You shouldn't have left. You should have stayed in D.C. over the weekend, to be quite honest with you. But it's this historic moment. I was really annoyed by that. And I'm trying not to be overly critical, and I'm trying not to pass judgment. But anyway, we had to wait for him to get back. And he needed to get back before 5. And he did within 10 minutes. And graciously, everybody else decided that they weren't going to, they weren't going to take any more talking time so that when he gets back, they was able to vote. And anyways, they went to recess. Before they went to recess, Senator Lee brought up those pre-sentencing reports again and says that Katanji Brown Jackson made them relevant. And I wrote down at this point, since Senator Lee, while y'all so concerned with the children and protecting the privacy of Americans and privacy stuff, you know good and well that those pre-sentencing reports are not something that needs to be out. But had I been Dick Durbin, I would have told Senator Lee and everybody else who wanted those pre-sentencing reports, I would have said, well, I'll leave it up to y'all. I'm not going to make the determination on it. Y'all make the determination on it. It's a 50-50 split Senate. We're going to let the Republicans make the determination on those pre-sentencing reports so you guys can put your names attached to it. Put your names on it. And when all these third parties that contribute openly and honestly to these pre-sentencing reports wonder why their information has gotten out there, because we know that once something is out, with the internet being how it is today, once it's out, it's out. So y'all let it get out and stop bothering me about this, because they know better. They know better. Anybody that's an attorney knows better. Anyways, McDermott says not on his watch. And I told y'all Senator Padilla arrived with no minutes to spare. And so they was able to do their 11-11 tie vote. And because they tied in the Judiciary Committee, then they have to move the committee vote to the full Senate floor, and the Senate has to vote to advance this out of committee. They were able to do that. The motion to discharge from committee, 53-47 was the floor vote to get her nomination out of committee. And the three Republicans who voted to get her out of committee were Mitt Romney, Murkowski, and Susan Collins. And they also said that they would vote for her confirmation. I know probably that we can count on Mitt Romney to keep his word to that vote. The other two, I'm not so sure of. Sometimes I think that Mitt Romney knows. This is what I think, y'all, about Mitt Romney. I think Mitt Romney has money. I think if he don't want to, y'all, Mitt Romney is 75. Good for him. I think Mitt Romney has money. Now, y'all can talk about how he got the money. Should he have the money? Blase, blase, blase. What I get out of Mitt Romney is he has money, he has family, he has morals. And I think sometimes he does stuff like this to remind the other ones that I don't have to kiss up to certain people, and I don't have to bend to the will of certain groups and certain people. I'm just letting y'all know that I got money on my own. And I got, family and constituents who believe in me, and I'm not really concerned. I'll be okay. And I think sometimes he does stuff like that. Cool. I kind of like Mitt Romney. I remember when he was running his presidential campaign, I could have told y'all that he wasn't going to win based on a few decisions that he made that didn't balance his ticket well, but we're going to move on. We're moving forward and not back. We're going to be the head and never the tail today. Okay, so I'm going to put this down and timestamp it for you guys. That was the end of Mondays. I'll put the date in the description. So Tuesday, debate opens up on the floor, and there's a few other, it started at noon on Tuesday. There's a few other issues that they're taking up, including some other people's nominations. But the primary thing we're here for is different senators came to speak on their support and not support of Katanji Brown Jackson. This happens every day. I'm going to put a link of the Senate's website in the description. They do this every day. They take transcripts of this every day. They live stream it every day. All types of issues are before the, whatever their agenda is. The senators get up and give speeches all the time. I'm going to focus on the speeches that were mainly about the support of Katanji Brown Jackson. Not that the other issues that were brought up weren't also important, but this is, this is saga that is, the way to Supreme Court. Okay, so Senator Corn was the first to speak. He said he wanted to make clear what his vote was against Katanji Brown Jackson. I wrote, at this point, who are you trying to prove? What are you trying to prove? See, just a few minutes ago, during the recap of the judiciary, I said, hey, if you're not going to vote for it, your reasons are valid, you're not going to vote for it. But now that we keep trying to make justifications, who are you trying to prove this to? Us or you? You're not going to vote for her. We know you're not going to vote for her. Nobody's going to remember all these reasons why you didn't vote for her. Even your constituents aren't going to remember all the reasons why you didn't vote for her. They're not. What's going to be remembered is you didn't vote for the first African-American female. And a lot of people didn't think she should have been nominated because they thought that, she's not qualified or something. So that's what your constituents probably are going to remember. Oh, she wasn't qualified, so that's why he didn't vote for it. They're not going to remember all these reasons you list. But Senator Corn, Republican, Texas, he talks about checks and balances, judge-made law, non-unelected judges. The founders are the ones who put that the Supreme Court justices would be unelected and chosen by the president with the advice and consent from the Senate. The founders made it that way. So you're such an originalist. The founders, they said the president picks. Did you think there was never going to be a Democrat president again? Not you pick. Not, oh, we didn't pick it, we didn't like her. The founder said that you wasn't supposed to pick. The founder said the president would pick. So you know the best way to pick your Supreme Court nominee is win an election and become president. That's what the founders said. See, I'm more of an originalist than some of these people. The founders said that. He ain't gonna support her, and basically he was filibustering in the colloquial sense of the word, not the procedural sense. In the colloquial sense of the word, he was just talking to be talking. He ain't gonna vote for him, we know that. Josh Hawley speaks next, talks about the child sentencing and that stuff. And then he says, this is important to me because I'm a parent. Isn't Katanji Brown Jackson a parent? Okay. And he's looking directly at the camera the whole time he's talking. I point that out to say, oh, everybody know when you guys watch these, or if you watch them live or live stream them, not everybody sits up and looks at the camera directly when they're talking. You know why? Because it's not supposed to be lights, camera, action. Somebody needs to. Anyways, he's looking directly at the camera. I'm sure campaign ad. And he's sponsoring some legislation about a mandatory minimum of 5 years with the child stuff. Good for him. Good for him. Dick Durbin, he says, why now? He's allowed to respond to Hawley. He says, why now? Talk about Hawley. He goes into the history of the guidelines. He says this is the first time any Republican senator ever tried. And then he says, I would like to remind everybody, Katanji Brown Jackson is a mother and a daughter. Then Josh Hawley says, it's a crisis now, looking right at the camera, front center, posted up, right at the camera, ready for the money shot, right at the camera. Dick Durbin tells him to be serious if you're going to be serious about it, not make this just about a nominee that you don't like. If you're going to be serious about it, be serious. Josh Hawley says, it's true that the Senate hasn't acted on this in 2 decades. I haven't been here in 2 decades, but Dick Durbin has. Now, that was very valid. I'm with you when you're right. That was very valid to say. They keep saying, oh, we haven't done this in 20 years. Well, I just got here. You've been here 20 years. Then say you haven't done anything in 20 years. Now, that was valid. Do I think Josh Hawley is being sincere in this? No. But do I think that statement was 100% on point? That I haven't been here for 2 decades, but you have? Yes. That was fair. That was fair. I'm with you when I'm with you. When you're right, you're right. Anyways, they take a recess. When they come back, Senator Cotton talks. Even he's not looking right at the camera. Yeah, even he's not looking right at the camera. He ain't gonna vote for. If we know you were on the judiciary. See, the people who weren't on the Senate Judiciary, when they give speeches about why they're not going to support, I'm a little bit more in tune with them. If you were on the judiciary, you already got to give your little speech about why you're not going to support her. Go sit down. You did this already. Move on. We know. So he ain't going to support her. He calls her a far left activist. And to that, I will say, what activism is activism. There's conservative activism, there's liberal activism. That's just, there is. If you are on the left, you see things like wanting to eliminate all forms of birth control as far right activism. So it's just these blinders of acting like that your position is not a position. Your position is not neutral. You're not the default person. You're not the default of thought. It's ridiculous. Anyways, then he says she was helping terrorists because he thinks that she helps terrorists because in keeping with the 6th Amendment, the constitutional right to have representation at a criminal trial, he thinks there's something wrong with that apparently. So will the real originalists please stand up? That's all I want. Will they please stand up? Will the real constitutionalists please stand up? And I'm about to tell y'all this. As an attorney, a lot of people say, well, that doesn't mean you have to represent them well. They will snatch your license. They will snatch your license, and depending on how you did, you might see yourself behind some bars. That is not how it works. The Sixth Amendment says that people in criminal cases have a right to counsel. And if you are somebody that's chosen like a public defender or anything, whatever jurisdiction you live in, your ethics dictate that you represent your clients to the best of your abilities. You be a zealous advocate for your client. That is your job. That is our duty to the Constitution. If you are a public defender or a defender or anything like that, and you have a client that you're representing, our duty to ourselves as attorneys and to the Constitution is to be a zealous advocate for your client. And your duty is to try as best you can to win that case for your client. That's what your job is. That's what you're supposed to be doing. That is your constitutional duty as an attorney when you choose to become a public defender. So I guess Senator Cotton doesn't want anybody to be public defenders. So virtually, he doesn't believe in the Second Amendment right to counsel in a criminal trial. He don't believe in that. I mean, the Sixth. Did I say second? I think I meant sixth. Anyways, he don't believe in that, I guess. He don't believe in that. So you only believe in those parts of the Constitution that you like? Okay. But you talk about other people. Okay, I get it. Senator Thune speaks. He is the minority whip. The Republican whip helps whip up the votes. Senator Thune is a Republican from South Dakota. He talks about taxes and stuff. He doesn't go into her nomination. Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts. He's going to support Katanji Brown Jackson. He said he found some of his colleagues' questions racist and sexist. He says he reminded everyone of the role of a federal defender to defend a constitutional right. And he brings up that John Adams represented the British soldiers in their Boston Massacre trial because he didn't think they would get a fair trial without representation, which the founders didn't think you would get a fair trial without representation either. That's why they put that in the Constitution. It's part of the Constitution. The Constitution. Isn't that what they kept spouting off? Constitution, Constitution. So then Senator Boozman, Republican from Arkansas, he talks about breast cancer screenings. Tammy Duckworth, Democrat from Illinois, shares a personal story. Jack Reed, Democrat from Rhode Island, he speaks in support of the nomination. And he says that some judges feel they need to make the Constitution resonate with today's society, looking forward and not just backwards. And he says, historical moment. Then John Barrasso, Republican from Wyoming, speaks. He speaks about needing more American energy. Chuck Schumer speaks, Democrat from New York and Senate Majority Leader. They take up another issue, another vote on something. And he says there was a block on a bipartisan agreement about COVID funding. Senator Michael Bennet, Democrat of Colorado, speaks about the economy. Dick Durbin speaks about Russia and Ukraine, and we already know he's in support of Katanji Brown Jackson. And then that day ends with Grassley and Johns, Republican from Wisconsin, talking about Hunter Biden and China and ties that the Biden administration might have to China, unsavory ties or not legal ties. Okay. So then we move on to, this is the second day, I believe, that her nomination has been on the floor, full floor for debate. Again, in the description, I'll put the dates and timestamps. so that if you're looking through it, it makes a little bit more sense. So the next day, this is April 6th. Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, starts. He says, she's going to be Katanji Brown Jackson's going to be an activist judge, nationwide injunctions, child sentencing. She's soft on crime. We know you're not going to support her. You've already said it. You're not going to support her. We get it. Okay, I moved on. Dick Durbin speaks. He says that Katanji Brown Jackson is deserving of this position. She's the right person for the right job. She has more than 500 opinions. Again, I'll point out that if your background is in academia, the record of you is a little bit different. Your record might be law review articles, maybe books, maybe speeches, and then you might have gotten on the district court. And so then you may have had opinions from the district court or the appellate court. It's a little bit different of a record. Not one is better than the other. I don't want to say that. And I don't like when people bring up Amy Coney Barrett hadn't even tried cases. An attorney is an attorney. Not all attorneys do the same things. You have some attorneys that go to trial. And when they're done with that trial, if there has to be an appeals within that same unit, they hand that appeals off to attorneys who just work on appeals. And those attorneys so-called don't go to trial because appellate court is not seen as trial court. But they are still just as much attorneys. They know just as much of the law. And I hate it when people said that about Amy Coney Barrett, because as someone who is an attorney, as someone who works in a legal profession, you will know that at the end of the day, that actually doesn't matter in terms of someone's legal mind, whether, they was a trial attorney or they weren't a trial attorney. That doesn't really matter as far as their legal mind goes. But when we're reviewing someone's record or body of work, that there is a difference between coming from the world of academia and what your body of work and record would look like than if you were a trial attorney or if you did do criminal cases as a judge. You just have different bodies of work. So the record looks different. And I imagine that if you were a trial attorney, if you were a criminal court judge, you might not have time to come up with a judicial philosophy because you're trying to teach these people in your courtroom on both sides about another type of philosophy. Anyways, Dick Durbin, he gonna support her. He gonna support her. She's ruled for and against Trump positions. He acknowledges that Democrats misbehaved in the past and they should have, and they should not have. And then look, now it's coming home to roast. The moral of the story is act like how you act. Don't do stuff and say, well, they did this, we gonna do this. And then you won't have to worry about things that you can't defend coming back to bite you in the behind. That's the moral of the story. So he says that most of his colleagues didn't do personal attacks. Some of them did. And then he went on to talk about other stuff. Basically, he supports. Chuck Schumer then speaks, Democrat from New York, talks about student loan debt and some other stuff, COVID funding, and then comes back to this being a historic moment for the Katanji Brown Jackson nomination, diverse federal judges, not only in how they look or how they diverse in demographic, but also diverse in their resume. And he says the last administration disproportionately elevated a lot of white men, perspectives, just in general, just different perspectives. Does that mean you can't learn another perspective? No, you can learn another perspective, but you didn't live that perspective and you still might have some blind spots. It's okay, but acknowledge that. Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia. You guys will maybe think that name sounds familiar because Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's running mate in the 2016 election, if I remember correctly. He says that for too much of our history, there were no women on the court except for the statue of Lady Justice. He says that At one point, equal justice under the law didn't apply to women. He talks about the 14th Amendment, and he says for 100 years, they still refuse to extend that equal protection to women. Again, nesting of rights under human rights. And then as society moves, we start to realize that by denying a group of people the right to do this, we have substantially interfered in this other overarching right that we recognize as giving to all peoples. Again, it's a little bit of an oversimplified way to explain things, but it is how it is. Then what else? He says Senator Kane still says her trial experience is very important and she's well-rounded. John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, speaks, talks about the southern border. Then Ted Cruz speaks, looking right at the camera. He's not going to support her. That's as simple as that. Then he starts that screaming. And so I'm moving on. I think I'm going to stop. I don't understand why he always screaming. Then he says, oh, she's the single Cruz. She's the single most liberal judge. Okay, well, who's the single most conservative judge? For every single most liberal, there's a single most conservative on that court. I think they used to call Scalia the most conservative justice when he was still living. It is what it is. That's how the court works. There's going to be some real liberal ones, some not so liberal ones, some real conservative ones, some not so conservative ones. It's based on the temperament of the president, who they want to pick, because the Constitution says that the president picks and the Senate gives advice and consent. Not picks, president picks. And a bunch of fear mongering is what Ted Cruz continues to do. I moved on. Debbie Stabenow, Democrat from Michigan. Do they call themselves Michiganders? I think that is so cute. Little stuff like that I think is interesting and cute. She urges the confirmation of Katanji Brown Jackson. She says, out of 115 justices in our history, we haven't had any African-American females. And out of 115 justices, 108 were white men. Again, perspective. She talks about segregation, abortion, personhood. She says if the court doesn't look like America, doesn't look like American society, sometimes it's harder to make decisions that best benefit American society. Again, do I think people who don't come from a certain background, those people probably can still make good decisions, even if they don't know firsthand, but they might just have some blind spots. And we all have things that we just can't speak to. We can learn about those things, but living them and learning about them are just two different things sometimes. Robert Cassidy Jr., Democrat from Pennsylvania, speaks in support of Katanji Brown Jackson. He speaks to the Beatitudes. Blessed are they who hunger for justice, for they shall be satisfied. I think I'm going to put that as the closing at the end of my website. I hadn't remembered that one. I liked it. Anyways, he's in support. Then we have Senator, I can't even read my own handwriting. That's how. I think Corden, the Democrat from Maryland, in support of Katanji Brown Jackson, talks about her family and law enforcement and the Fraternal Order of Police support, ABA support. Then we had Maria Cantrell, the Democrat from Washington State, talks about supply chain issues and chips. Amy Klobuchar is next, the Democrat from Minnesota. Talks about vaccinating, but she also speaks in support of Katanji Brown Jackson. Pat Murray, Democrat from Washington, in support of Katanji Brown Jackson. Sherrod Brown, he is in support of Katanji Brown Jackson. And then he also goes on to do something that he says has become a tradition. And the person that is helping Katanji Brown Jackson is not there to do it or lead it this year. So he's leading it. But basically, him and a few other senators are going to read Martin Luther King Jr.'s A Letter from a Birmingham Jail. And so he doesn't start it, but he introduces it. And then the next person, Mike Rounds, a Republican from South Dakota. Hirono, the Democrat senator from Hawaii. Senator Collins, Republican from Maine. And I just want to point out, I think she had on a leather outfit and it looked good, and I want it. She looked good. And then Sherrod Brown, Democrat from Ohio. Tammy Baldwin, Democrat from Wisconsin. Mitt Romney, Republican from Utah. And then they finished the reading of the letter. Raphael Warnock, the Democrat from Reverend Raphael Warnock, the Democrat from Georgia, finishes the reading. And then Sherrod Brown, Democrat from Ohio, finishes up, and he thanks all of them for joining him. I think he said that's become a tradition. So then Gary Peters, Democrat from Michigan, supports Katanji Brown Jackson. Tommy Tuberville, Republican from Alabama, he talks about Russia, Ukraine, and China. Kevin Kramer, Republican from North Dakota, he talks about inflation, economics, some other stuff. Rick Scott, Republican from Florida, he speaks against the nomination of Katanji Brown Jackson. He says she's a nice person, but concerns she only got 2 appellate opinions in her current position. So appellate, and I'm pretty sure he's an attorney if I remember correctly. Appellate courts, they take turns writing opinions just like Supreme Court nominees. Just because she's only written 2 of the opinions does not mean that she's set on the hearing for only 2 cases at the appellate level. That just doesn't mean that. It means somebody else wrote the opinion. She might have been I think they sit in groups. Like, you might not have the whole Court of Appeals. You might only have 3 of them or something like that. Y'all, this gets in the weed. They told us this in law school. It's not that I wasn't a good student. It's just that that's not, I don't know. It's not that I wasn't a good student, though. But anyways, just because she's only written 2 opinions doesn't mean she's only been present for 2 cases. That's not what that means. And I'm pretty sure he knows that. Anyways, he don't like her. No. He says she's a very nice person. She's just not qualified to be a judge, he says, basically. So good for you. Senator Hirono, Democrat from Hawaii, supports Katanji Brown Jackson. She goes more into the history of the guidelines and re-explains some of the same points that I explained about those guidelines. Jerry Moore, Republican from Kentucky. No, I didn't write down where he was from, but he talks about basketball. He was so happy about basketball. I was happy for him, but I did not get into it because I was here for Katanji Brown Jackson. But on another day, I would have been right there with him. Not in knowing about basketball, I don't know anything about sports, but I just like that he was happy for his state. Woo-hoo. Kristen Gillibrand, the Democrat from New York, she speaks in support of Katanji Brown Jackson. Marsha Blackburn, Republican from Tennessee, obviously she's not in support. And she was screaming, and she was doing all that screaming too. And I usually don't see her screaming like that, but once she started that screaming, I left. I went on about my day. Then Ron Wyden, the Democrat from Oregon, he talks in support of Katanji Brown Jackson, and he admonished the behavior of some of the senators. He says that he voted for Justice Roberts. And he says that even, he called it juvenile theatrics among some of the Republicans. That's a good way of putting it, juvenile theatrics. That was a nice way to put it. and he reminds them of what happened to Merrick Garland, and then he's in support. Bill Haggerty, Republican from Tennessee, he talks about the border crisis, and some other stuff. He probably won't be in support. It looks like that's the way we're going. Senator Lee from Utah gets up and talks. He's not in support of Katanji Brown Jackson. Again, Senator Lee was on the Judiciary Committee. I'm not going through this speech again. He had 3-4 days to say what he wanted to say on the Judiciary Committee. We know you're not going to support the woman. Why are you up here talking again? How much more camera time do you need? Go pass a bill. Go write some legislation. You do not need to be up here speaking. You had time to speak. Senator Coons, Democrat from Delaware. And again, he sits on the Judiciary Committee too. And that's good that you coming out and you want to show your support of Katanji Brown Jackson, but you also had your time to speak. This needs to be for the people who weren't on the Judiciary Committee, and so they did not have their time to speak. How much camera time do some of y'all need? I shouldn't talk about people who like to hear themselves talk. I done made a whole YouTube channel to hear myself talk. Anyways. Senator Coons, Democrat from Delaware, he's in support. I'm not going through all that. He had time to talk. Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island, he talks about climate change. He was on the judiciary. We know he's in support. I'm glad he didn't get up there repeating the same talking points. James Lankford, the Republican from Oklahoma, he says that Katanji Brown Jackson, she would be nice to invite for dinner. He's not in support of her. He said that he did talk to her about tribal law. That's something that he thinks is a big area in Oklahoma. He said that doesn't factor in for everybody, but they have 31 tribes that they deal with. And so it comes up a lot. He's not going to support her. He talks about Chevron deference. And he gives to me what is a very oversimplified fly-by-night way of explaining how we deal with ambiguities in administrative law. There's an ambiguity in administrative law. We defer to the agency that is tasked with creating administrative law, because if they are tasked with the execution of this area of law and there's an ambiguity in the rule or regulation that they put out, the courts give it back to them because that's their job in the first place. So we basically tell the executive, this is how I put it. Instead of the court creating the rule, which apparently some people are so against, the court sends it back to the agency that is supposed to be creating the rule in the first place. And yes, there are sometimes issues with that, but there's a lot of reasons why we do that, because we don't want the court creating the rule. The agency is supposed to create the rule. So if there's an ambiguity, the agency needs to fix their own ambiguity, because they're supposed to be creating the rule in the first place. So we send it back to the rule-making body. That's why we do that. But even still, that's oversimplification of this area of the law, but whatever. Anyways, he ain't gonna support. I'm not staying on him all day. Got to get through this so I cannot miss the vote. Tammy Baldwin, I think. Senator Baldwin, Democrat from Wisconsin, in support of Katanji Brown Jackson, and talks about professionalism and gives a little bit of a history of the court. Tom Carper, Democrat from Delaware, in support of Katanji Brown Jackson, in support of Cory Booker's remarks, and he didn't appreciate the attacks, or he called them attacks. I'm going to say he characterized them as attacks. Now, I will say this. Not everything that was a hard question was necessarily an attack. And Lindsey Graham, he did a good job about saying repeatedly to her, this isn't about you. At some points, he even told her, he said, I don't expect you to answer. I don't expect you to have an answer. And this isn't about you. This is about what went on in the past. Lindsey Graham was honest in that, and he was fair to her with that. Because he told her, he said, I don't expect you to answer. He said, nobody's supposed to answer. He said, I'm just saying, this is how it should be. So, whatever. Then Bernard Sanders, y'all may know him as Bernie Sanders, but his given name that they had on the screen was Bernard Sanders, the independent from Vermont. He talked about Amazon and Jeff Bezos and the economy. I'm sure he supports Katanji Brown Jackson. He didn't say that, but I'm sure he does. Then Michael Bennett ended the day. And y'all, these are long. This day, let's see, this was April 6th. It ended at like 8:50. I think they cut off the stream. It just goes all day. Michael Bennett, Democrat from Colorado, he spoke in support of Katanji Brown Jackson, talked about her background, her parents, school, how it was different from her and her parents. And she set her sights high. She's not soft on crime, and he describes her as being down to earth. That was the end of that day of debate. I am going to jump back in to the hearing, get caught up, so I can get out to you, hopefully, what would be the actual vote and final day of debate. And we are almost at an end to this saga. As always, I'm DC the Blacksmith. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, visit the website on the banner. Read some of the things that I've written about, different legal commentaries from a legal mind. And until next video, stay informed.